In this video, I'm going to talk about the EK Monoblock for this Crosshair Hero VIII motherboard. And it's going to be the centerpiece of a lot, I think, of the visuals that's really going to help set Redstar here apart. I am TheGrayingTech, a gaming insider. If you'd like to learn how to improve your gaming performance, start now by clicking that subscribe button. So here in the middle, you can already see a nice open area. I've already removed the Dark Rock Pro 4 that I had in place as I was testing the air build for Project Redstar. I have cleaned it up. I also cleaned off the air cooler just to make sure everything was nice and clean and gently put that away as well. Additionally, I had to remove the heatsink that comes with this motherboard. And here it is. This black finish, quite honestly, just was not cutting it. This aesthetically wise does not match what I am going for. Additionally, having an entire monoblock, I think, gives Redstar a visual appeal, which I was kind of going for. So instead of using this, we are going to use this. Now, I already did a complete teardown of this guy right here. This is the EK Monoblock specifically designed for this motherboard. On the back here, you can see my sticker is still in place. So what I'm going to do first is actually sand that down. A little bit of extra grit is going to help remove any imperfections and really truly make sure that that is nice, level, and perfectly polished before we move it into the case itself. Additionally, you can see I have painted this. I also went over that in another video as well. The paint itself, the process was not all that easy. This guy in particular was a giant pain, and that came down to simply the fact that it would not seal once I had everything put back together. Now, if you run into this issue, I have two tips for you. The first tip, put the gasket and the assembly itself into the freezer. If you get it cold, the gasket itself will shrink. And if you get the metal cold, it will actually help keep the gasket in place as you're trying to fit it into the narrow crevices that exist inside of these monoblocks and most water blocks for that matter. The second tip is use something like this. This right here is Super Lube. It is specifically designed to help lubricate O-rings. What that's going to do for you is give you a little bit of extra stickiness to hold the O-ring in place when you try to mount it to the block. I guess the third tip I actually have overall is to make sure that you are pressure testing each of your components individually, and then as you start the assembly process, try to pick a good stopping point to actually test what you have in place. Right now in Redstar, I actually have most of the end caps capped off. That allows me to use my release valve here as a point that I can pressure test this entire loop assembly as it stands today. And I've already gone ahead and done that. And what I found was I actually had a leaking component that I had to replace. I don't blame Primo Chill on that. These 180-degree bend fittings are rather complicated. And I ordered 8 of them, and to have one of them turn out bad, I kind of am okay with that. I haven't even contacted Primo Chill for the return process, but ultimately that is one of the risks that you run when you run these kind of open loops. Sometimes you could get a bad fitting. And by pressure testing that, I was able to identify which fitting was bad, why it wasn't working properly, and get a replacement for that product. Okay, on to the actual assembly process itself. Because we have the VRMs exposed, we need to put down the thermal pads that EK ships with this block. This is going to help us prepare to put this giant monoblock down on top of the choke, down on top of the VRMs, and get things nice and properly thermally saturated once all of this is kind of going, and that should give us just a tiny bit more reliability when it comes to the voltage and current being provided to the processor from that VRM solution. So that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. Now it is time to do the hardest thing probably for this entire build. We're going to put down Kryonaut as our thermal grease of choice, and then we have to actually mount the plate itself. The reason this is so challenging is what I would consider a slight flaw in the way EK has designed this block. This right here is the back plate, and you can see that there are 4 screws that are going to be screwed directly into the monoblock itself. But in order to do all of this, the monoblock has to be in place. You then have to get to the back side of the motherboard. Now, Lee has already helped you there in the fact that there's a nice giant opening for you to do exactly that. But you still have to access it, most likely when it's in this position. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to scoot this all the way to the edge without it tipping over to get underneath to be able to screw this back plate in place just enough so that we can get proper contact down and then actually do the cross method to secure the back plate to the monoblock, which is going to secure everything down to the motherboard itself. If that's a little bit intimidating for you, it's okay. You're going to be able to do it. I can do it. You can do it. It's just a little bit of an annoyance. Here you can see the nice and shiny monoblock itself. Nice, polished, ready to go. Looks great. And I'm going to do everything I possibly can not to mess up that finish. Now, Steve from Gamers Nexus has a specific pattern that he likes to use when installing these Ryzen chips. And that is an X with 4 dots around the middle of the X itself. So let's see if I can duplicate Steve's work. Ooh, 1X. Another side of the X. A dollop there. Come on. Dollop there. Dollop there. Dollop there. Now, there is so many comments on so many different YouTube channels about application of thermal paste. Honestly, as long as you have enough on there, it shouldn't be a problem. And as you could see in the previous video that I used the exact same method when we installed the air block for this, I had great coverage. So I already know that this is an effective way to coat this Ryzen chip, which is exactly why I'm still doing this exact method. If you have your own method, that is great. Congratulations. So here is the trickiest of tricky parts. We have to get this down and in place enough so that it covers the VRMs, but doesn't land on anything that it's not supposed to. I'm just giving it a gentle little wiggle because then the hard part comes getting underneath of this and securing the back plate. Okay, so there you have it. There is the monoblock itself installed. I spin it around. You can see the back plate that I was referring to. Nice thing about these Lee cases is this area is nice and exposed so that you can get access to those areas. But at the same time, it required a delicate balancing act here off the edge of my desk. I had to get my wife involved, and we all know that that comes with repercussions as well. But we're in place. 2 items I want to note. The way that I colored this section right here where it says Crosshair was simply to take the same paint that I was using in the aerosol can, spray that into a cup, and then smear it across those letters. Then I used isopropyl alcohol and a blue paper towel to wipe the top of it down to clean it up. Eventually, enough paint actually built up inside of the crevice to give me that nice look. Second, because this is going to pair up with the Radeon block that EK has made, I had to add in an additional 180 fitting right here. That would not necessarily have been the choice that I wanted to go to, but the spacing on the GPU is different than the spacing on the CPU, which means you got to be a little bit flexible in kind of the setup. In an ideal world, everything would fit together perfectly, but it's not an ideal world. Which brings me to the next video. It's time to get the GPU water block actually ready to go inside of here. And then we're going to do a little bit of a pressure test to make sure that the CPU and GPU combination are holding air properly before we finish off the loop. And when that video posts, you can check it out right there.